Coming up on Network Africa. The rippling effects of the war in Iran emerges as Nigeria suspends pilgrimages to Israel and the Middle East. Iran's ambassador to Kenya vows to respond to Washington in light of attacks on Tehran. Plus, Zimbabwe releases over 4,000 prisoners under a presidential amnesty program. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos, and we begin with reactions to the war in Iran. The country's ambassador to Kenya has vowed his country is preparing to take measures in response to recent U.S. and Israeli attacks, stressing that Iran will defend itself with determination and might. He was speaking to reporters in Nairobi on Monday. He confirmed the Ayatollah Khamenei's death, calling him a martyr. Iranian officials have warned that his killing would mark a turning point, with the Revolutionary Guard vowing retaliation and declaring this great crime will not go unpunished.
The armed forces of ancient land and relying on trust, the United States of America and the Zionist regime of Israel launched a cowardly and coordinated military aggression against our homeland. Their warplanes and missiles violated the territorial integrity of the Islamic Republic of Iran, striking defensive infrastructure and non-military facilities in several of our cities. This is not merely an act of aggression. It is a flagrant violation of Article 2(4) of the Charter of the United Nations and a grave threat to international peace and security. In this same cowardly attack, the enemy sought to strike at the very heart and soul of the Iranian nation. I must inform you with a heavy heart and with tears that I cannot hide that our beloved leader, the guiding light of our revolution and the guardian of our unity, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, peace upon him, has been martyred. The world will witness once again what the Iranian nation is capable of when its dignity, its sovereignty, and its leaders are attacked. The armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, inspired by the heroic legacy of this ancient land and relying on trust in Almighty God, will defend the dignity and security of the Iranian nation with determination and all their might.
And here in Nigeria, all Christian pilgrimages to Israel and the Middle East, including those by private operators, are on hold owing to the escalation of tensions in the region. Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Christian Pilgrimage Commission, Bishop Stephen Adigbite, announced the suspension at a press conference in Lagos today. He says the situation will be reviewed when normalcy returns and it's deemed safe to do so. Bishop Adigbite also confirmed that over 500 pilgrims that traveled with the last batch for 2025 are safely back in the country. This comes as the federal government assures Nigerians still in the Middle East of their safety.
Today, I am pleased to announce that the last batch of the Christian pilgrims for the Nigeria Christian Pilgrims Commission 2025 main pilgrimage exercise to Israel and Jordan arrived in Nigeria safely at 4:30 a.m. this morning, the 3rd day of March 2026, at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, Lagos, and the last batch dropped at Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. Indeed, it is important to stress at this juncture that the over 500 pilgrims that made up the last batch arrived in Nigeria safely and intact without any issue. In the light of this, the Commission wishes to state categorically that the 2025 main pilgrimage exercise has come to a successful end on the 3rd of March 2026 with the arrival of the last batch of Christian pilgrims in Nigeria, and that the Commission is closely monitoring the development in Israel as they unfold. The Commission further wishes to affirm that the safety and comfort of Nigerians and Nigerian pilgrims is a priority, and that is non-negotiable. Therefore, every pilgrimage of the Commission and that of the private pilgrimage operators is hereby put on hold forthwith until the security situation in Israel and by extension the Middle East normalizes for international travels. May I also urge every lover of peace to pray fervently for peace of Jerusalem and peace in the Middle East to avoid a serious case of humanitarian situation in the region.
Let's bring in African Affairs analyst PoliticsToday to shed more light on the effects of what is going on in Iran on the African continent. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Ajike, great to see you again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Right, and I guess we should kick off with that very obvious question on the impacts the war in Iran could have on Africa. Global oil prices have already gone up, and that's bound to trickle down here, isn't it?
Yes, obviously. I mean, that is always the situation. While on one hand, increase the price of crude oil at the international level would affect Nigeria positively, because obviously you're going to the revenue from that would increase the country's coffers, add more money to the federation account, monies for the states to also share. But at the same time, some refineries also in Nigeria here are also importing crude oil into the country to offset the deficits that are coming from Nigerian supply of Nigerian crude to the refineries. So obviously that is also going to, the price of those this product also would also go up at the international market, and then Nigeria would also have to spend more money, obviously. And then the implication, macroeconomic implications, inflation obviously would spike. Of course, the country has been suffering a spike in inflation, but in recent times it has been a bit on the downward side, or it has remained stable. So there is that tendency because we have seen the impact of increase in crude oil. I mean, to Nigerian consumers, the increase in oil, petroleum products to Nigerian consumers, and we have seen again that in the past few days since this crisis started, that prices have actually gone up by about 100 naira. This would have a telling effect on the prices of goods and some other things, prices of even imported products into the country. So that will be also create some difficulties for Nigerian consumers, and not a very good situation. And then you have, your report talked about the pilgrims and what is being done by the federal government on their behalf, ensure that they are also safe. But you still have people that were planning to embark on a pilgrimage, to Saudi Arabia. I have been affected. Some of them have been affected because because of the closure on the air closure. So it's a problem, I guess, and even for students that are also going back to schools too would also be affected. And this is apart from the general feeling of apprehension. We have seen what has happened in Nigeria after the collapse of Iraq, and then the spread of ISIS and all that. Though this is far from the situation in Iran, because the situation is still unfolding and nobody knows what will happen in the next few days. So we are still very far from that. But then we cannot deny the fact that what happens in the Middle East somehow has a way in impacting Africa security-wise. Libya, a major case, and then the spread of the terrorists in Libya to other parts of the African continent, and we are still suffering that today. But like I said, we are still a bit far from that, depending on how situations pan out in this crisis.
Right, and far from it as we may be, I'm sure you've seen those protests held in some parts of Nigeria, especially in Kano. Some Muslim faithful feel a personal hurt by what U.S. and Israeli strikes have done, especially the killing of the supreme leader in Iran. And it has increased more ill feeling towards America. Are these justified, though?
Well, they have every right to feel aggrieved about the killing of their leader. Though the Iranian regime has been a contentious one for quite some time. It has not even been able to achieve peace with its neighbors. You have in the Middle East, you have the radical countries made up of Iran, and then of course Syria under al-Assad. Al-Assad has long fled that country. They had some of these their proxies in Yemen, in southern Lebanon, and then in Gaza. Of course, these groups have been decimated. So the killing really of the religious leader has elicited, because you have a reasonable number of Shiites in Nigeria, and they are very seriously expressing their grief and their anger over the death of Ayatollah Khomeini. And you can see how they have been able to express themselves. The good thing is that they have not shown any threat of violence, apart from the chant of death to America, which is one of those things that characterized the Iranian regime, under Khomeini. And of course, there was also a fallout of that too. What we have, has not happened. So I am not exactly sure that the group that is aligned with the Shia movement in Iran is a very militant, very violent one in Nigeria. There has not been any history of violence on their part, apart from clashes with security forces in Nigeria in the past. But this has not resulted to any acts of terrorism. They have reasonably been peaceful, in fairness to them. And so if all that we're going to hear from them, is this their protest and then their usual chant, death to America, perhaps we can live, with that. But like I said, they have every right to feel aggrieved over the killing of their spiritual leader, but we hope that it stops at that and that they don't go beyond that.
Right, and as the federal government assures citizens of their safety in the Middle East and calls for calm on all sides, how long can it maintain this pacifism as it continues to monitor developments out of Iran?
Well, the federal government really directly has no bone to pick in this fight, except, moral suasion, except to make statements for peace, for security in the Middle East, and to express worry about what is going on. I think that is what the government should be doing, and other governments in the world, to see how this situation can be de-escalated. Because the reality is that the situation in the Middle East is still unfolding, and we don't know how it could go. We don't know what is going to happen in terms of, this successor, government in Iran. We don't know if we're going to have a very serious public unrest, and that might be put down by remnants of the regime in Iran. And we also don't know the consequences of this killing. It's not just the issue of bombing between United States, Israel, and Iran, the missiles that are being fired from one place to the other. But what might happen with lone wolves, people acting in different cells, trying to, enact vengeance, for the killing of their spiritual leader and then his subordinates in Iran. We hope that it doesn't spread to other parts of the country if that does happen. So what we are looking at is containment. I'm not sure Nigeria can do much other than to, make diplomatic statements about the need and necessity for peace.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. We must thank you again, African Affairs Analyst at PoliticsToday. Thank you again for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And still to come on the program. Former Senegalese President Macky Sall officially enters race to become the next UN Secretary General. You stay with us for details. Welcome back, and we're still following developments in the Middle East. Let's just quickly bring you up to speed with happenings in the last couple of hours. The U.S. has warned of an imminent attack in the Saudi city of Dhahran, a major center for the oil industry. It's home to the headquarters of the Saudi national oil firm Aramco. But the city itself is also home to the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia. It's feared that that could be the next target for the Iranians. U.S. citizens are being put on safety alert in the event of any attack. The UAE says it has intercepted 172 Iranian missiles and 755 drones since attacks began on Saturday. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense says there have been 186 missiles in total, with 13 of them falling into the sea and one other hitting the UAE's territory. The ministry detected a further 812 Iranian drones. Our UAE correspondent Mayowa Adegoke is out there monitoring the situation, and she joins us now. Mayowa, great to see you. Bring us up to speed with what else has happened since that initial attack on Saturday.
Thank you very much. It really has been an interesting couple of days. The Iranian attack on the region, and of course including the UAE, has entered its fourth day. Now, while people are cautious, majority of residents are staying indoors, staying at home, and keeping safe, it has been quite concerning with the explosions going on. And this is not what people are used to in the country. A lot has happened. Different, some of these missiles that you say, were intercepted. The debris from those interceptions have impacted different buildings. Because you do know about the hotel on Palm Jumeirah and a couple of other buildings as well. Just today, there was such an incident in Fujairah. This is another Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. And of course, this is the Fujairah oil industry zone, which was impacted. There was a fire outbreak, which authorities say was handled. And so there's so much going on. There was a press briefing as well just a few hours ago where government officials were sharing the government's readiness to continue to defend its territory. But one thing is clear, they are suing for peace, and they're suing for negotiations as the only way to curb further escalation. So that's what we're monitoring at this point in time.
Right, and Iran says it has spoken to leaders of the countries in the Middle East about the situation and explained to them why they are being attacked, and that the attacks were not directed at them but at U.S. military sites in their countries. Did the UAE government confirm it had this conversation?
So yes, it is known that Iran is only targeting U.S. bases and U.S. businesses. But that's not entirely the reality around. Say, for instance, the UAE port in Jebel Ali that there was a fire outbreak on, I think, about 2 days ago. That is not a U.S. base. So there are a number of incidents that we've seen that sort of negate what Iran is saying. However, people do have this sense that there's not an attack on civilians in general. So this is not an all-out war where they're trying to harm civilians. However, is it absolutely true? Is it accurate to say that they're only targeting U.S. bases? That is not what we see on ground. And of course, you do know that there were reports of such an incident at Dubai airport as well. So again, the facts on ground would put a question mark on what Iran is saying.
Right, and help us understand what's happening on the ground at this time, apart from explosions, which you can hear from time to time in the distance, whether or not it's U.S. military installations the Iranians are targeting.
Well, on ground, like I just said, it's a mixed bag, of course. A couple of residential homes impacted. Again, a lot of those are they're impacted because of falling debris, right? So these are not necessarily the actual target. But once a missile is intercepted and it's falling to the ground, sometimes it'll hit, a company or hit a residential apartment, for instance, and then that's where you get fire outbreaks, etc. Other than the explosions that we've seen, people are going to work, although majority are working from home. There's people are free, to be honest. The residents have a sense of security to an extent. They have confidence in the government that they are doing everything to keep them safe. Yes, it is concerning. A number of organizations are launching free mental health care services for those who are in need, and I suppose a lot of people will be in need of those. Even schools have launched such initiatives to help children who are sort of schooling from home now. So everyone switched to remote learning for children, while some are working remotely. So that's what we've seen so far. Businesses are still on. People are opening, businesses as they ought to. The government is also keeping tabs on prices of goods and commodities to make sure no one hiking prices unnecessarily. Matter of fact, they have said prices must remain the same. While on the one hand, they are concerned and they prioritize business sustainability, it is also, we do not want to give anybody reason to panic or to be inconvenienced because of the situation. So prices remain the same, and the government is keeping close watch to make sure that businesses stick to them.
All right, and the people, we know the few cities known for being major favorites to tourists from around the world. How are these attacks shaping how people in Dubai see and feel the world?
So for residents, it's one thing. However, for visitors, it is another. Just you imagine, spending good money to visit a country. Hey, I just have a great time, and that's not the reality on ground. So for good reason, a lot of tourists and visitors are panicking. They're looking for how to get back to their loved ones. On the one hand, yes, government has tried its best to make people a lot more comfortable by extending their stays at no extra charge, accommodation covered, food, feeding covered. But of course, yes, they are quite concerned and would like to get back home. Now, one thing is when all of this is over, and hopefully that is soon, the UAE will have its work cut out for it to sort of reconvince and reestablish that reputation as one of the safest countries in the world. It will definitely have its work cut out for it.
Right, Mayowa, thanks again, and please do stay safe.
Thanks for having me.
Let's switch gears now to Zimbabwe, where a presidential amnesty has led to the release of nearly 4,000 prison inmates, not for good behavior, but to ease overcrowding in the nation's prisons. The announcement was made by President Emmerson Mnangagwa's cabinet in February. The same day, it approved changes to the constitution as part of a plan to extend his presidential term until 2030. Justice Minister Ziyambi said the amnesty is targeted and merit-based, focusing on vulnerable groups and those who have demonstrated significant progress in their rehabilitation. He said the action reflects a commitment to restorative justice and national compassion, and that it did not include prisoners convicted for serious crimes. And what do you do when you have already contested and won the highest office in the land? Well, you look for more elections to run. At least that seems to be the example being displayed by former Senegalese President Macky Sall, who has officially entered the race to become the next UN Secretary General. Well, the UN confirmed Mr. Sall's candidacy, revealing he was nominated for the top job by Burundi. Despite achievements during his tenure as president, he continues to face criticism at home, notably accusations that his administration hid the true extent of the country's fiscal problems. The world body will elect a new Secretary General to replace outgoing Chief Antonio Guterres this year for a 5-year term starting on January 1, 2027. Traditionally, the job rotates among regions, but when Mr. Guterres, who is Portuguese, was elected in 2016, it was supposed to be Eastern Europe's turn. And as we end the program today, Here's a fun fact. Did you know that 12% of African adults have access to at least one mobile money account, compared to just 2% worldwide? Well, don't look at me. I didn't write this. The information comes from the World Economic Forum, which says only a third of adults have access to a traditional bank account. Well, you and I now know. Thanks for watching Network Africa. I'm Joke Rogers.